The room was already heavy when the doors slammed open, and every admiral felt the shift in the air. The officer's face said everything before a single word left his mouth. He carried dispatches clutched so tightly, his knuckles had turned white. As he stepped forward, the dim lights flickered against maps, models, and the fading confidence of men who once commanded the Pacific. When the first damage report was read, a quiet tremor passed through the room. The second report froze it. Entire air groups gone, carriers burning, survivors drifting in open water. No one breathed. These men had been trained to hide fear, yet their eyes betrayed what discipline couldn't contain. One admiral whispered, almost pleading, "This can't be accurate!" Another lowered his head as the truth struck him. The last operational carriers had vanished beneath the waves. The silence that followed was not calm. It was the sound of an empire realizing its spine had snapped. In that moment, the war changed, and every man in that room knew it. Before the silence of the war room, there had been swagger. For decades, Japan forged its navy into the symbol of national strength, a force the world was expected to fear. Young officers grew up believing their sailors were the finest, their pilots unbeatable, their ships crafted with near-sacred precision. The admirals remember those early triumphs with a mixture of pride and regret. Pearl Harbor's shock, the swift victories in Malaya, the sweeping raids across the Indian Ocean, all of it had convinced them that destiny itself favored their fleet. But confidence slowly hardened into illusion. Skill was mistaken for invincibility. Momentum was confused with permanence. In the dim room, the narrator reflects on how triumph had blinded them to the cost of complacency. One older admiral finally breaks the spell, his voice trembling with age and honesty. "We built our doctrine on perfection," he says. "One mistake, and everything collapses." His words linger like smoke, revealing the fragile foundation beneath their past glory. The contrast sharpens. A navy that once shaped the tides now drifts toward ruin, and every man present senses that the fall they now face was set in motion long before today's reports arrived. The first reports arrive like distant thunder, low and unsettling, but impossible to ignore. Survivor accounts spill across the table, burning decks, lost formations, pilots who never made it back. Moments later, confirmation of another carrier slipping beneath the waves forces every admiral to straighten in his seat. An intelligence officer, pale and exhausted, delivers the blow none of them are prepared for. Entire air groups wiped out, veterans gone, years of irreplaceable experience erased in a single afternoon. The room tightens as he speaks, each word pulling the walls closer. One admiral slams his fist against the table, demanding to know who verified the numbers, insisting the Americans must be exaggerating their claims. Another stares at the map in front of him, his voice barely a whisper as he asks, "If this is true, who defends the homeland?" No one answers, no one can. Confusion flickers into fear, not the loud kind that erupts in panic, but the quiet, suffocating kind that presses against the chest and steals the certainty from a man's voice. The dispatches keep coming, each one heavier than the last. Fuel reserves dwindling, pilots missing, destroyers scattered. The first cracks appear in the admiral's expressions, thin lines of dread breaking through practiced steel. And for the first time, the illusion of control begins to crumble. The weight of the reports hangs over the table, yet some admirals refuse to let the truth take root. One leans forward, gripping the edge as if steadiness could be forced into the moment. He speaks of a final decisive battle, a single strike that could turn the tide. Though everyone knows the fleet needed for such a miracle barely exists. His voice carries the echo of old doctrines, the kind forged when Japan still believed victory could be willed into existence. The narrator reflects on how this culture punished honest assessment, rewarding loyalty over clarity until illusion became indistinguishable from strategy. A young officer, trembling but determined, steps toward the center of the room. He unrolls a map marked with statistics, shipyards, fuel reserves, aircraft production. The American numbers stretch across the page like an approaching tide, impossible to stop. "They outproduce us in every measure," he says quietly. "Every single one." The room reacts like a struck nerve. Senior admirals erupt, accusing him of defeatism, questioning his sources, demanding he retract the comparison. The clash between denial and reality becomes a storm, voices rising, accusations cutting through the dim air. Yet beneath the noise, something deeper pulses. Strategic logic, once their anchor, begins to unravel as they confront the scale of their disadvantage. The arguments grow sharper, more desperate, revealing the emotional collapse hidden beneath their uniforms. And in the center of the chaos, the truth waits, patient and undeniable. The shouting fades as another officer steps into the room, clutching a single slip of paper. His expression is hollow, the look of someone who has carried a message too heavy for one man. The narrator slows the moment, letting the tension thicken as he crosses the floor. No one speaks. No one moves. The paper is placed before the senior admiral, and in the stillness that follows, the entire room leans into silence. He unfolds it slowly, as if fearing what waits inside. His eyes trace the words, and the tremor that runs through him is unmistakable. The last operational carrier, gone. For a long second he cannot form a sound. The war has taken much from him. Ships, men, hope, but never his voice. When it finally emerges, it arrives cracked and fragile, stripped of the steel that once defined him. Then, our navy is gone. The words fall like stones into water, sending quiet ripples through the room. No one argues. No one offers a plan. The final illusion has shattered. A suffocating silence settles over the table, heavier than defeat itself. Admirals who once spoke with thunder now sit motionless, staring at maps that no longer matter. The narrator reflects on how empires do not fall in explosions alone. Sometimes they collapse in a whisper. In that moment, every man understands the truth they had spent months avoiding. The fight has moved beyond their reach, and despair begins its quiet, inevitable descent. Long before the last carrier slipped beneath the waves, the seeds of defeat had already taken root. The narrator shifts the lens, revealing the quiet forces that shaped the disaster unfolding in the war room. Japan's factories were straining, their output shrinking each month. Fuel shipments faltered, leaving carriers anchored instead of sailing. Even worse was the loss of veteran pilots, men shaped by years of training, experience, and instinct. Replacing them with rushed recruits was like asking shadows to replace sunlight. Yet the admirals clung to belief over arithmetic. They trusted spirit to outweigh shortages, courage to overcome empty fuel tanks, tradition to counter industrial giants. Every sign warned them that the balance of power had shifted, but they mistook warning for weakness and kept fighting ghosts of their own early victories. Failure to adapt became its own form of surrender, one too subtle for them to recognize until it was too late. A younger officer, voice heavy with regret, finally speaks the truth none had dared to say aloud. "We worshipped the past," he murmurs, "and the past betrayed us." His words linger in the air, stark and undeniable. The rational explanation settles like ash, marking the quiet aftermath of their emotional collapse. The silence after the final report stretches until it becomes unbearable. One admiral exhales, shakily, the sound closer to a surrender than a breath. Another removes his cap and sets it on the table, as if laying down a burden he can no longer carry. The resistance that had fueled their debates only minutes earlier begins to fade, replaced by something heavier and far more honest. A younger commander rises, his voice steady, but dimmed by reality. "We must prepare the nation for defeat," he says. The words drift across the room like cold air, settling into every corner. Some of the older admirals tremble, their eyes reddening as they confront the collapse of everything they devoted their lives to building. Others stare blankly at the maps, unable to look away from the lines that no longer hold meaning. The narrator reflects on the quiet tragedy unfolding. These are not villains, but men watching their world unravel stitch by stitch. Pride, certainty, and duty, all slipping through their fingers. Acceptance begins to replace denial, slow but undeniable. And in that fragile moment, the psychological end of the Imperial Navy arrives. Not with explosions, but with the soft breaking of human resolve. When the voices finally fade and the maps lie untouched, a deeper understanding settles over the room. The narrator shifts into reflection, reminding the viewer that the fall of the Navy was more than a military failure. It was the moment the Empire's anchor slipped away, leaving the nation adrift. The admirals sit with their thoughts, confronting the weight of lives spent, choices made, and warnings ignored. Some wonder if humility might have spared them this fate. Others can't escape the cost of believing too fiercely in their own invincibility. The truth is stark. Power without reflection grows brittle, and certainty without doubt becomes dangerous. Their fleet didn't vanish in a single night. It crumbled under the weight of illusions they protected for too long. As the scene closes, the viewer is left contemplating leadership, pride, and the quiet consequences that outlast every war.